Female genital mutilation. Is it an Islamic issue or is it a cultural issue? You often hear apologists say that FGM has nothing to do with Islam. It's just an African or a cultural thing. But I'm going to be showing you how FGM comes from Islamic teachings. As if women in Islam didn't have it bad enough already, they also have to be cut up like this and robbed of their bodily autonomy in order to limit their pleasure and control their sexuality. I'm going to back this up with receipts, Islamic references, scholarly opinions, and videos from Muslims and Muslim scholars. If you wanted proof that Islam contributes to this heinous practice, you got it. Let's get into it. To start, where does FGM happen? The majority of FGM cases occur in Muslim-majority countries or communities. FGM is common in several Muslim-majority countries in Africa and the Middle East. Countries with the highest prevalence rates are Somalia with 98%, Egypt 87%, Sudan 86%, and Mali 89%, are all predominantly Muslim. FGM is often socially linked to Islam in these regions. FGM has also been linked to having a high prevalence in Iraq. In Southeast Asia, particularly in Indonesia, where about 49% of girls undergo FGM, the practice is generally milder and it's tied to local customs rather than Islamic doctrine. Many Muslim-majority countries, including Turkey, Jordan, Morocco, have little to no practice of FGM. Some minority Muslim communities in countries like Kenya and Tanzania practice FGM alongside non-Muslim communities. So, right away, you are now going to see why apologists are saying, oh, it has nothing to do with Islam. They're saying it's not universally practiced, but the fact is it is practiced more in Muslim countries and communities. The best thing to do when attacking a position is to steelman it. That means to fully understand the other person's position and represent it in the strongest way possible. We need to acknowledge that FGM is not entirely limited to an Islamic practice, but Islam has a lot of blame here too, and we're going to get to that. First of all, what are the types of FGM? The World Health Organization, WHO, defines it as 4 types. Type 1, partial or total removal of the clit. Type 2, partial or total removal of the clit and the labia. Part 3, infibulation, which means narrowing the vaginal opening and or stitching parts together. Part 4 is other harmful procedures such as pricking, scraping, etc. Islamic apologists, as you're going to see, will tell you that Islam encourages type 1 only, or type 4, removing part of the clit to reduce pleasure, not the whole thing. That's much better, right? Yeah, right. I'm going to show you a Muslim doctor who primarily sees Muslim women, and she says she's seen women who've had it totally removed. That's because this isn't a proper medical procedure. A lot of the time it's done in back alleys or homes with no anesthesia by someone who's not medically qualified or trained. You're going to hear a woman talk about her FGM experience very soon. What are the harms of FGM? The WHO states FGM has no health benefits and it harms girls and women in many ways. It involves removing and damaging healthy and normal female genital tissue, and it interferes with the natural functions of girls' and women's bodies. The way Muslims get around this is they say that their FGM is not really FGM. They hate it being called that. They prefer female circumcision. This video by Lubaina speaks about how she survived FGM.
I was 8 years old, dragged into a clinic wearing maroon shorts and a beige tank top. A color combination I now avoid. The colors of flesh and blood. My mother, an educated and successful woman, kept silent, swayed by the myth that cutting facilitates easier childbirth, probably comforting herself that it was okay because everybody does it. She also kept silent while a bearded doctor with a big belly and sharp blade cut away an intimate part of my young body with no anesthesia. Since I started asking more questions, I've been told all sorts of strange things, like, it's what our ancestors did. We didn't know any other way. It makes for cleaner periods, and it keeps girls safe from being promiscuous. Really? Today, my father, and most of my family supports my work against FGC. Yet, he refuses to discuss his role in my violation. I don't think I'll ever truly know the fullness of what I've been deprived of. I've struggled with so much shame. Do I deserve feelings of pleasure? What about my sexuality? What will happen if I decide to birth children? With every new intimate experience, I'm confronted with deeper worries and discomforts. Do I orgasm the way nature intended? Is this how it's supposed to feel? Will there always be an overwhelming sense that part of my sexual identity was taken away from me? I often ask my female friends.
She wonders what she's robbed of. She wonders why this happened to her. She struggles with shame. She doesn't know what it'll be like when she has a baby. All of these anxieties. You see how awful this practice is? And in the next video, you're going to hear how Yasmin Muhammad was subjected to FGM. It's a very disturbing story of how she was held down and cut, but it needs to be heard.
It was just like a dark room. There was really nothing in it. And just so, like maybe about 6 or 7 women just waiting. Next thing I know, I was blindfolded. So it was just dark. I didn't know I remember the women sitting there, and then it was just darkness. And I remember just really fighting, like really fighting. And I remember that they had a really difficult time holding me down. Which is why, so I was like fighting, and like trying to get out, and then more people would hold my hands, and there'll be more women on one arm and more on the other, and my legs, and I was like, they were lying me down. Somebody was holding on to my head, and like my legs were like spread, and a couple of women on one leg, couple on the other, and I still was like moving, and it was just like, the pain is undescribable. It's very painful. And I just remember screaming. And yeah, I remember I still have a scar from, like, she cut like kind of on my lips because of just too much movement. So I think that's why I was also even bleeding more, because it wasn't only like what she was supposed to cut, but then she ended up cutting me. I remember that Sheeta was like this, it was new and pink, and then it just had blood like all over the front was just blood, and all in the back, and the whole floor was just blood. And I know that some, depending on the severity of it, some people do die from just bleeding. Yeah, I don't really feel pleasure, like, as I've heard, like, a lot. I know all women are different, and it's like, it's more complicated than just having a clitoris. At the same time, I also know that in terms of that, I don't really experience pleasure like the way other people, like I hear other people have, or I've never really had like an orgasm or any of that. And also in terms of like like sex is just not a big part of my life. Yeah.
Okay.
Probably has PTSD. Poor woman. She has a scar on her private parts. And she said she's been deprived of pleasure fully. She doesn't enjoy sex. This reminds me of the acid attacks that are done to women, which are intended to disfigure and wreck their lives. They rob a woman from life experience of sexual pleasure. So awful. What for? To control their sexuality and to limit promiscuity. So, is this really from Islam? Let's start with this Salafi Muslim guy on TikTok who uploaded a video called "Liberal Muslims are getting offended by Islam and speaking from desires," where he speaks about how Islam does legislate it for women. He quotes scholars. But before we get to that, I'm just going to remind you, I'm going to be uploading more such content on the topic of Islam regularly. So be sure to subscribe if you're new here. All right.
For people that want to learn. If you don't want to learn, that's fine. Get offended by the Sunnah. You'll answer to Allah why you don't like the Sunnah. Maybe these liberal Muslims and Tabarruj queens think they're above and beyond the Prophet ﷺ and his wives and any of the Sahaba. So there are many evidences according to the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba of this particular practice. This practice isn't meant to harm the woman. Rather, this is something that many of the wives the Prophet ﷺ did, the women at the time of the Prophet ﷺ did, and they saw it as something beneficial, and this is their reasoning behind it.
So we have a religious Muslim giving a quick overview. It comes from Hadith and Islamic scholars. He says if you don't like it, it's not my problem. Basically, it comes from Islam, so take it or leave it. The popular Islam QA Fatwa website says regarding circumcision, it says, "Praise be to Allah. Circumcision is not an inherited custom as some people claim. Rather, it is prescribed in Islam and the scholars are unanimously agreed that it is prescribed. Not a single Muslim scholar, as far as we know, has said that circumcision is not prescribed. The evidence is to be found in the Sahih Hadith of the Prophet, which proves that it is prescribed. For example, the hadith narrated by Bukhari and Muslim from Abu Hurairah that the Prophet said the fitra, meaning the natural disposition, is 5 things, or 5 things are from the fitra. The hadith narrator literally had to include these 2 variations. They thought this was important enough. They actually, like, it's such a meaningless difference. Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. The fitra is 5 things, or 5 things are from the fitra. However Muhammad said it, who knows? Circumcision, shaving the pubes, cutting the nails, plucking the armpit hairs, which I have a video on as well, and trimming the mustache. This hadith includes circumcision of both males and females. So basically, Islam says that circumcision is part of the sunnah. And then there's another hadith. And by the way, whenever the hadith is in Bukhari and Muslim, it's considered the most authentic of all hadith, okay? According to Sunnis. Number 2, Muslim, Sahih Muslim narrated that Aisha said, Messenger of Allah said, when a man sits between the 4 parts, arms and legs of his wife, that's a funny way to put it, and the 2 circumcised parts meet, the ghusl, meaning the bath, the mandatory bath, is obligatory. So you have to do this before you pray. So the Prophet mentioned the 2 circumcised parts, the circumcised part of the husband, the circumcised part of the wife, which indicates that a woman may be circumcised just like a man. And lastly, this is a weak hadith. We're going to talk about it. Abu Dawud narrated that a woman used to do circumcisions in Medina, and the Prophet said to her, do not go to the extreme in cutting. That is better for the woman and more liked by the husband. But the scholars differed concerning this hadith. Some of them classified it as da'if, weak, and others classified it as sahih. So basically, we don't even know if he actually said this, right? The fact that circumcision for women is prescribed in Islam is confirmed by the hadith above, and not by this disputed hadith. But the scholars differed regarding the ruling. So basically, there's different rulings, and that Salafi guy on TikTok is going to say the same thing. But basically, it's either obligatory for both males and females, okay? Or it's sunnah for both males and females, or it's obligatory for men and recommended for women, okay? So those are the opinions. So you can see the different options are that, right? It's basically definitely a good thing at the very least, and more strongly, it's obligatory. You have to do it for both men and women. So we're not making this up. The Islamic texts, Islamic scholars, and Muslims in general, especially in certain cultures, believe in FGM. Back to the TikTok video. I'm going to skip most of the video because it's boring as hell, but I'm going to jump to the conclusion because I think it's interesting to look at how he puts it.
The ulama have 2 positions on it. Either it's a wajib, it's obligatory for the woman, or it's just a sunnah that is permissible and a woman is rewarded for doing it, but she's not punished or sinful if she doesn't do it. And this case could differ from woman to woman. Some medical doctors may deem that such a procedure could be really harmful to a woman if she has pre-existing medical conditions. Again, I'm not a medical doctor. I haven't studied women's anatomy or anything like this, but this is simply what the scholars say. So if you have an issue with whatever I said, you have an issue with the Prophet ﷺ, you have an issue with the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, you have an issue with the Sahaba, you have an issue with the scholars, and you have an issue with Islam altogether. People that get offended by this video, you can get offended all you want. The deen of Allah does not care about your feelings. And if you're genuine when it comes to learning the deen of Allah, you should listen to all these evidences because it will be beneficial to you and you're going to learn more. This video is already too long, but yeah, that answers the question on female circumcision in Islam. Liberal Muslims and Tabarruj queens, you can cry about this all you want, but hey, you don't got an issue with me. You have an issue with Allah.
There you have it. Not a medical doctor, doesn't know anything about women's genitalia, but wants to be an expert on this and promote cutting up women. Notice he says there's two positions. Either it's recommended or it's mandatory. No other option. If you don't like it, take it up with Allah, not him. Now I'm going to show you a medical doctor, a Muslim scholar who promotes it. This is actually the most disturbing of all, that a medical doctor would do this. Meet Dr. Haifa Yunus. Dr. Haifa Yunus is an American board certified obstetrician and gynecologist, and the founder and chairman of Jannah Institute. Imagine an American board. She graduated from the Mecca Institute of Islamic Studies in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Despite being a practicing OBGYN, she actually promotes female genital mutilation, FGM. She has her own institute, the Jannah Institute, and she's also associated with Yaqeen, as you can see here. They describe her as passionate about spreading the word of Allah and igniting the love of Islam and the Quran through her teachings. This is her Jannah Institute, and this is her YouTube channel, which you can see has almost 700,000 subs. She had a live stream 3 years ago where she defended the practice of FGM. Let's take a look. On the Hijabi subreddit, the post says, "How are we letting Dr. Haifa Yunus get away with promoting FGM?" And then they're quoting what she says, literally word for word. FGM serves a useful purpose to reduce desire. This is seeking perfection. I see clips of that woman preaching go viral left and right even today. She's a popular scholar. The comment section is always full of praise and admiration. This woman, an OBGYN, promotes female genital mutilation in a video that's still up today. I noticed that even on this video, Muslim women were quite horrified and said things like, "It serves as a useful purpose to reduce desire." What does that even mean? Why would anyone choose to reduce desire? What perfection is being talked? This torture should be outlawed, period. No justification, ladies. I just discovered Dr. Yunus is a practicing OBGYN in Saudi Arabia. Here's to assuming the oath a medical doctor takes in the kingdom begins with "first do harm." Dr. Haifa, I hope your license gets revoked. Revoke her license. I was totally uncomfortable this entire lecture. And then there's a lot of cognitive dissonance, right? I'm a Muslim and I would very much like to clarify to my non-Muslim fellows that this ain't Islam. FGM is not a thing. I don't know which Islam is she talking about, but the one I have lived my life with is, and still living is, not the one she's talking about, right? Why would Allah want the women's desire to be reduced but not the men? Is that statement even authentic? Or is it for men who want, or people who want to control women's desires? Let's listen to her describe it herself.
In case of a woman, it serves a useful purpose, which is to reduce the desire. But this is seeking perfection, not removing something harmful. So to remove the skin, extra skin, in the case of a man is actually beneficial to the man because of the extra skin may collect more urine. In the case of the woman, it is not something removing harm. It may be beneficial. It is practice recommended, but it's not an obligation.
She said something good to do, and you can see why people are outraged. And then now she's going to talk about the type of FGM that's allowed. She doesn't like calling it FGM, but she admits this would fall under FGM, but she prefers to call it female circumcision.
Meaning, if you are going to do it, it's type 1 only. Type 1 is the simplest one. Look at this. Compare this with this. Compare this with this. Labia majora, still there. See it? Labia minora, still there. Right? What we call the prepuce, only this part here, removed and covered. Just a little bit. See what it says? It's removal and partial or total removal of the clitoris. It's usually partial, meaning I have seen these. I've delivered women with circumcision. You can identify where is the clitoris. So if you look from the outside, you don't see much difference. And you can see where is the clitoris. So it's just a little bit of removal of the skin. Think of the circumcision where we remove the skin, right? And sometimes we remove a little bit, and sometimes we remove a lot of it. So the whole glans, this is for the men or for the babies, so the glans is completely exposed.
There's a lot of dishonesty here in what she's saying, because it's clearly all over the place what happens to women. It's not type 1 only. She also explains later on in the same video that she's gone to open up women who were stitched up, which is type 3, and then asked them if they wanted to be restitched after she opened them up. Let's listen to that.
You'll be very surprised, and I will never forget this. This is more than 12, 13 years ago. She was a physician from Sudan. And of course, I've seen it during pregnancy. And I asked her this question because she had type 3. And I said, I am going to need to open it up during labor. Do you want me to cut it properly? I mean, to suture it back properly, meaning open it up completely and as much as I can bring back the labia, or you want me to bring it back the way it was? That's the woman's rights. I have no right to impose my belief or what I think. That's her body. This is her choice. And I was so surprised when she said, put it back the way it is. And this is a physician. And I was really surprised. I had more, this is one, but more said, put it back as normal as you can.
So we can see quite clearly it's not just type 1. Muslim women are damaged in all different ways. As she was saying, even this Sudanese physician who was having pregnancy was stitched up, which is not type 1, which was earlier what she said was, oh, it's usually just a little bit of cutting, but as you can see, it's all over the place. Sometimes it's completely removed. As you heard Yasmin Mohammed speak earlier, the way this is done with multiple women holding you down and no anesthesia, it's not really fair to pretend Islamic circumcision is anything less than FGM. It's imprecise and damaging, and it's crazy to hear this American board certified Muslim doctor talk about restitching up a woman back to FGM after opening up her vagina for birth. Awful, just awful. And now I'm going to show you a Muslim doctor doing FGM in America. This is Jumana, a doctor, a Shia Bora Muslim in the city of Detroit that has been charged with carrying out FGM on young girls in what's believed to be the first case of its kind in the country. I was shocked to read about this happening in the US. Prosecutors said Jumana had been performing the practice on girls aged between 6 and 8 for 12 years. She was investigated after authorities received a tip-off. In 2018, charges were dismissed because of a federal law prohibiting FGM was ruled to be unconstitutional. In response to the ruling, the US Congress passed the Stop FGM Act of 2020, which criminalized the practice. She might have got away with it, but nobody else will now that it's criminalized. In conclusion, there you have it. We've discussed what FGM is, how it's harmful, shared real stories of women traumatized and reduced by this. We've looked at Muslim scholars who promote this heinous practice and the Islamic texts they use to justify this. While this practice is not universally practiced by all Muslims, after all this, can you still say with a straight face that FGM has nothing to do with Islam? This is yet another blow to the gut for Muslim women. As if they didn't have it bad enough, they also have to deal with being cut up like this. Enough is enough. These stories need to be told, and we need to call out this nasty religion and this nasty practice for what it is. Islam isn't good for humanity. It doesn't help anyone. It's time for you to leave it behind and live your life. Thanks for watching. Thank you to my patrons for your continued support. I love all of you. Thank you for those of you who support me on YouTube as well through the YouTube membership. And for those of you who are new here, please subscribe. Keep in touch as I'm going to be uploading more such videos on the topic of Islam. This is your friendly ex-Muslim Abdullah Samir signing out.